In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about how children have difficulties with food in earlier stages of life.
If you watch parents with their young children, one of the places that there's terrible conflict around is eating. Many children are somewhat neophobic. They don't like new things, or at least they tell you that they don't like them. And many children are also quite disagreeable, so children vary in their temperament. And there are some children who will do everything they possibly can to please you, and they're pretty, they're easy children to take care of, although they have their own sets of problems. And then there are other children who are very disagreeable, and their fundamental position in life is no. And that usually emerges at about the age of 2. Right, and that's when children discover no, and it's the magic word, because parents tell them that please and thank you are the magic words, and that's wrong. No is the magic word, because what no is a test case. It's like, all right, where do I end and where do you begin? And the way I discover that is by you ask me something, I say no. My son was like that. He was hilarious as a 2-year-old because like everything you asked him was no. So I'd ask him a bunch of things that I knew he didn't want to do, and he'd say, no, no, no. And then I'd say, well, how would you like some chocolate ice cream? And then he was really on a roll by then, and he'd say, well, no. And then, he'd think about it and realize that, he just passed up an opportunity for chocolate ice cream. And so that was a good trick to play on a 2-year-old as far as I was concerned. Yeah. So, but no is a really important word, and it's the place of the battleground between the child. It's a Freudian idea in some sense, although Freud identified this conflict more with toilet training, which is also a place where terrible conflicts can emerge. I knew a family who had a daughter who would only use the toilet if she had a diaper on. Now that's defiant, man. She had full control over her system, but there's no damn way she was going to do what her mother wanted her to do. She had to put a diaper on and then she would go to the toilet. So yes, and there was like a year's worth of warfare around that, I can tell you. But you see the same thing at tables with kids, because people have a real hard time, and I don't know if it's always been like this, but modern people have a terrible time trying to get their children to eat. Because they're possessed by stupid ideas like, well, the child will eat what's good for them. It's like, do you? Why would you expect a 2-year-old to do that? Who the hell eats what's good for them? It's like chocolate eclairs and milkshakes for lunch. That's the right thing to do. And children aren't stupid, or maybe they'll just eat hot dogs and nothing else, or maybe hot dogs and Kraft dinner. That's all they ever want. It's like, you can let your kid get away with that? Well, what do you do then? They're going to grow up to be someone who isn't smart enough to enjoy food. That's not that helpful. It's like there's about 6 things in life that are intrinsically pleasurable, and eating is one of them. So, you can warp them pretty nicely when they're little about what they're going to be allowed to eat and what not. And, you deny them a whole lifetime of pleasure, the pleasure that can be involved in exploring new foods and eating new cuisines and all of that. But especially with little monster children, getting their eating habits straight is no joke. You have to have rules. There has to be consistency. There has to be discipline, and there has to be orderly timing. Because the kid is also trying to organize their bodies are trying to organize themselves with relationship to, the rhythms of the day, with sleeping and waking and eating and all those things that are the basic elements of a fundamentally healthy existence. And trying to get a child to be in tune with some sort of stable rhythm for some children is extremely difficult. I've had clients whose sleeping and eating was chronically dysregulated. So which basically meant that for their whole life they never ate properly and they never slept properly. They never learned how to do it. And it's partly because this little battle here never occurred. It's like there is a dragon at the table. That's partly why it's so important to have your family around the table on a fairly regular basis, because that's a fundamental place where the individual meets society. Human beings share food. It's like, that's weird. There aren't any other animals that do that except fundamentally, from mother to pup. But human beings share food, and it's really built into our systems at a deep level. I noticed with my daughter, who was quite agreeable, at least when she was young, I used to play tricks on her too. So, when she was at the table and she was about 18 months older, so maybe she'd have some dessert, and then I'd ask her if I could have it. And she'd give it to me right away, which of course made me feel horribly guilty. It's like stealing candy from a baby. I felt like Mr. Burns, So but she'd hand it to me right away and with a smile on her face, which I thought was absolutely remarkable, you know, and it was curious to see that that was built in as an instinct at such an early age. By the time she was 3, you know, this kid's age, there's no damn way she was going to hand me her dessert, you know, because it was at that point, I think, somewhere around that point that, you know, she had started to conceptualize herself more as an individual, and that initial instinct that was a sharing instinct had vanished, you know, and then you have to kind of socialize it back into place. But anyways, there's plenty of dragons at the table, you know, and you'll see that too. Sometimes you go out to restaurants and, you know, there'll be a family there with their 2-year-old or 2.5-year-old, and the thing is like completely out of control, you know, it's like a cat with a clothespin on its tail running around the cafe or restaurant doing nothing but causing trouble. And, you know, the thing about, I had a client once who was a very immature man, but he had had a child, and he wanted to sort of, you know, wake up a bit and try to be a civilized human being and not to screw up this kid too terribly. And he had this dream that the crib for the baby was by the window, and that a bolt of lightning had struck inside the window and let a ball of lightning go in the house, and it was tearing all over the place, you know. And I thought, when I discussed the dream with him, I thought, well, you know, the dream's telling you about children. It's like there's a powerful potential inside of them, but unless it's socialized properly and integrated properly into culture, then it can be a terrible destructive force. And there's, you know, there's little doubt about that.